right, hello everybody. Welcome to What is All Control, an exploration of non-traditional games. My name is Matt. I will be your host for the next hour. I am one of the department heads for the MAGFest Indie Arcade. If you do not know what the Indie Arcade is, I've got great news. It's here at MAGFest, down at Expo C. Go on down, play some games made by these people and also lots of other wonderful people who are out in the audience, some of whom are holding phones. We are a collection.
If they're holding phones like they're at like your uncle's wedding,
Yeah.
then they're with us.
Yup, that's our people. We are a collection of alt.ctrl games and experiences and art projects and hardware art projects. And if you have no idea what any of that means, I've got great news. You're in the right room. We're going to talk about that for the next hour. To give y'all a general idea of what the schedule is going to be, we're going to do some intros. Then we're going to have a long rambling conversation about what alt.ctrl is and how we all got into it and what sort of stuff we do. And then we'll have a few minutes for audience Q&A right at the end. So I guess let's just start by going down the line. We'll start with you, Alistair. If you want to introduce who you are, some of the stuff you've done, feel free to plug any of your projects that you have going on also. We'll do that again at the end so people remember when they leave.
Cool, yeah. By the way, do wave at me if you can't hear me. Okay, I'm getting a thumbs up, so that's the opposite of a wave. Brilliant. So yeah, my name's Alistair. I'm a game developer working as a kind of one-man studio in the UK, in Bristol. And I do, alt.ctrl games, obviously. I do a lot of interactive performances. So I've got a live stage show where I get people running around a room with barcode scanners, zapping each other, putting tablets on their bellies, running around pretending to be Power Rangers. And I've also, down in the indie arcade area, there's a game played using a paper shredder called the Book Ritual. And that's thank you. And also Alistair's Magic Box, which is a bunch of Sega Mega Drive hacks, all operated from a kind of hacked Sega Mega Drive Genesis console with buttons and dials and stuff attached to it. Thank you. I'll let you go on, Travis.
Go for it, Travis.
Hi there, I'm Travis Foz. I'm an instructor at Indiana University, Indianapolis. We just got Purdue out of there, so it's easier for me to say. What about me? I teach game development there. I used to teach web development, a lot of programming stuff, a lot of terrifying students with the word for. Alt.ctrl stuff, we'll get into it. Downstairs, I have two-ish games. One is Frame Shifter. It's an upside-down bicycle wheel, or bicycle. You spin both wheels. The goal is actually to get you to spin them real fast. So if you played that game and you're not spinning the wheels real fast, you've done it wrong. Please go play it again. Please don't shove the bike over. I've only had to fix it twice so far, which is actually kind of surprising for MAGFest. So
There's a lot of weight on it. I'm surprised that it got knocked over as quick as it did.
I meant to have a third sandbag.
We'll see what we can find.
But I only had so much time. I was filling those sandbags in the morning in the cold. My hands hurt by the time I was done doing it. There's a second one there called Record Collection, which I think will be useful for this conversation. It's a controller I built for my students for a project. I built 12 of them and gave them to the students. They made a bunch of games, and we took 3 of them that I thought were particularly awesome and submitted to this festival. And you all accepted them for some reason, and I'm super excited. And they're super excited to see their games here. So go play those games, and maybe at some point we'll talk about some other dumb stuff that I've done that led into why I'm making the things I'm making now.
We will, yeah.
Good.
Get it ready. Yeah.
Good.
Hi, my name's Amanda Hudgens. I am, I don't know what I do as a job, but for alt.ctrl stuff, I'm probably best known for either Syntentable, which is the 100-button fight stick. It's been at MAGFest for 5 years?
Yeah.
Something like that, and it's also toured internationally, which is kind of cool. And then Kotaku wrote an article about a game I did once with my wife where you smash guitars on stage called One Night Only, and at the end we destroyed the actual controller and the program, so you can never play it again. And then I think it's been nicknamed the bed game, but if you were at MAGFest a couple of years ago, that was also one of mine that I made with R25th. I'm based out of Kentucky, so yeah.
And I'm Matt Lepage. I'm one of the department heads for the Indie Arcade, as I said earlier. I haven't made any games, but I've been helping run the Indie Arcade for a few years. So I'm really excited to know all of these people through the Indie Arcade. I think a good place to start would be to just take the question on the slide. I bet we could all give completely different answers that are all correct. So Alistair, you're going to go last because you're best at improv. Travis and Amanda, do either of you have a concise sentence answer to what is all control?
Oh yeah. So Alt Control is the type of game you make where your parents ask you how you're going to monetize it, and the answer is you can't.
Always it comes up to like, how are you going to make money off this? That's not the point. I think the way I would put it is a game that people wouldn't immediately have pre-understanding of how to play it, which leaves out a bit of the alt control, right? But it's essentially issues you won't pick up a gamepad and know how to play the game, which will include gamepads in my definition of alt control. Maybe we'll get into that discussion later.
Yeah, I mean, I think, having been introduced as a person who's good at improv, I don't think I can live up to Amanda's answer, so I think I might just give a boring answer.
Yeah, go for it.
Which is games made using unusual, unconventional devices, or using a conventional device in an unusual way. Maybe it could be anything from a game controlled using a wobbly door stopper, or something which we have. Line wobbler down there. Check it out. It's really, really good. Or something which uses something strange and unusual instead of a screen, like projecting lasers on a ceiling, or I don't know, a fishbowl. I don't know why that's the first thing that popped into my head. Or it could be, you might be, soldering together your own components, or you could be reusing existing things in an interesting way, taking a keyboard and operating it using a plastic beak attached to your nose is something that I've seen that is a great example of an alternative controller that requires absolutely no electronics knowledge to be able to create.
Yeah, I think these are all great answers. I think for me, the thing that ties it all together is that it's this weird thing. A lot of the stuff we have at the Indie Arcade is sort of one of a kind. A lot of the people who are making games for us are hobbyists who just had a weird idea and then decided to run with it. We've had a few different people be like, I saw weird games at the Indie Arcade and I thought I could make one of those, and it worked out well for them.
I think it's a fairly, it's also either frequently hobbyist or it's getting more to be academics as well. You see a lot of academics in the space, like Travis.
Yeah, actually Travis.
Isn't Haberdasher also?
Yep, we've got a few different student games this year too. And I know, Travis, how do you sort of introduce the topic to your students?
I use the worst method possible because of a specific instance in the video. Tatiana, I'm forgetting her last name now, alt control teacher from France.
You know Tatiana.
It's Tatiana Vilela dos Santos,
there we go.
or Mechbird on Twitter.
Mechbird is usually how I refer to her. But she has a video for alt control at home that it's what is alt control? And that's how I introduce it. It's just a series of examples of here are strange, unusual controllers. It's not your keyboard, it's not your gamepad. And my students look at it and they get increasingly confused as to why anyone would do this. There is a point in that video, I will not say what it is. I had not watched the whole video before playing it, and I was like, oh, dang. Really shouldn't have played that. Now my students are going to be chattering behind my back about this.
We can't go into details because this is a family-friendly panel.
Yeah.
It's a good video though, and we do recommend it.
Yeah, it is a really good video. And that particular moment kind of helps you think oh, okay, we can get real weird with what we're making.
I mean, I think there is something interesting that you bring up about there being a lot of students and academics working in this space. I'm not a student or an academic. For me, on a professional level, I'm not expecting any of the individual games I make to make any money, or me to find a way to sell them, or tour them or whatever. But from a kind of professional level, what they are doing is allowing me to have the most unusual, surprising portfolio, which is the kind of thing that people who hire me for projects will say, oh, that guy's interesting, let's get him in because he made a game with a paper shredder, he must have interesting ideas. So that's how I kind of justify it from a business standpoint. But honestly, I mean, from a kind of creative standpoint, I guess my approach to it is very similar to, an academic kind of way of doing things, because I'm making games out of strange, unusual devices because I want to explore and I want to ask questions, and I'm like thinking about, well, how do games work? How do we interact with them on a human level? And often when you take out the kind of the familiar ways of doing things, like, the kind of familiar genre traditions or whatever, you can find some really interesting answers to questions about, how do we interact with games? How do we pass the information that's on screen or in our hands? Or how do we build an emotional relationship to what's going on?
Yeah, I'm sorry.
That was a perfect point. I was going to say, like, in academia, what makes alt control particularly effective or interesting is exactly, like, it allows you to ask questions. That's why you're making these things quite often, is you're like, oh, what if I did this thing differently? What can I learn, and what can I then tell other people? So same approach sometimes for art, right? And sometimes in academia for science. Like, there is a hat downstairs that was part of a PhD dissertation work. So if you go downstairs, you see big hat.
Go play the hat.
Someone is a doctor of philosophy because they made Big Hat. And Big Hat let them ask really interesting questions, which I'm super interested. I'm really excited to. I invited her out to give a talk at my university, so I'm really excited to hear what questions she asked and what they answered. It's wonderful. Anyway.
Yeah, I wanted to circle back on, like, a lot of the things that you said, Alistair, sort of raise the question of, like, how did all of y'all get started in this sort of field? Like, Alistair, what was your first sort of alt control-ish project?
Well, I started out kind of professionally back in 2010. So it was the sort of early days of the iPhone and iPad, and I had a kind of iPad game that I added a multiplayer component to, where I accidentally made it so people could kind of reach across the screen and sabotage each other and cheat. But that cheating that they were doing on the shared touchscreen was much more interesting than the game that I had made. So, and that's not me joking, that is genuinely true. And so I kind of made another iPad game which explored that same idea, but was kind of directed, okay, let's make it all about that shared tablet getting in each other's way cheating experience. And then I think it was 2013, 2014, I found, you can get these really big touchscreens now for Windows PCs. So I made something similar, but because it's a much bigger screen, I was like, you could fit tons more people around this screen. So I made a game like this for up to 20 players on the same screen, all getting in each other's way. And then the next project, I was like, you know what's bigger than a touchscreen? A whole room. So I attached buttons to the walls of a room and had people running around a room to play a game.
It's a very natural progression.
Yeah, it's an evolution. And
No,
I think,
every step was the logical next step.
Yeah.
Totally makes sense to me.
absolutely. But yeah, I mean, I think a lot of what was kind of motivating me was this thing that I'd noticed is when people share a physical space, they kind of become performers in a way. They start trying to make each other laugh. They play less to win the game and more to be the funniest person in the room. And that's something that I've kind of found myself keeping on coming back to, creatively in all of my games. And I think the physicality of alternative controllers creates situations where that kind of physical interaction is going to happen.
Mm-hmm. That's actually something that I really love about the space too, is that it's pretty rare that someone will take an alt control game seriously the first 5 or 6 times they play it, which I think is a strictly good thing.
Oh,
because
no.
it means
there are people who take my games very
there are people who take them seriously. We run tournaments.
But I'm also working with a fight stick of a fighting game. So yeah, there are people who take it seriously on first blush. They're wrong, but they take it very seriously.
Do you want to talk about how Sentinel got started? Because I know this is part of it.
Sure.
Yeah.
I got started in alt.ctrl because a game that I was working on as an intern got into the very first alt.ctrl GDC. It was a game where you had, so bit of inside baseball. If you're not familiar, an Xbox 360 controller has 2 motors in it, a big one and a little one. However, and if you've ever had them on the table, they kind of wobble. However, if you replace both motors so that they're the same size, now you've got a race car. So that was Deluxe Turbo Racing 360. We used so many batteries for that thing. It was great, but when I was there, I saw all these games. I think I saw Line Wobbler for the first time there. I saw, I think, Choosatron for the first time. There was a, I want to say, French team that was very gleefully putting a bunch of goo in a box and making people touch it, and I don't remember anything else about that game except they were really excited about it. And so I saw all these cool things, and I was like, that's neat. And I went home, and I made my first alt.ctrl installation, which was a bunch of hanging flagging tape. Flagging tape is that stuff that you see, like if you ever go hiking and someone's like wrapped a piece of like non-adhesive tape around a tree to say like, oh, this, don't go here. Yeah, I made a big hanging thing out of it. And my original was, I'm going to make it a king-size bed. That was a mistake. It was 3 feet long. But that one, that was, it used an accelerometer, but I didn't know how to use an accelerometer, so it acted as a microphone, and it was a lot. But yeah, and from there, I moved to, for some reason, I guess my next one was Syntentable. Mm-hmm. And Syntentable was literally the product of one day I had a dream, and I was like, I want to make something with 100 arcade buttons on it. You can see that scope is a problem I suffer from. And so I was like, oh, that'll be really cool. And my wife was like, have you ever wired a single button? And I was like, no, but I don't think it's that hard. So the very first Syntentable actually only had 16 buttons, and I was like, this was easy. How hard could 100 be? Never make something with 100 of anything is the correct answer. And so yeah, that was originally for an art installation for a children's museum, so it's highly durable. I've toured everywhere with that thing, and now there's an arcade version playable downstairs.
And I remember talking to you about it. I don't remember when I talked to you about this. It must have been years ago, and you mentioned that it was like it's impossible to get good at Syntentable.
Oh yeah, no,
you can't. You can't do it.
You can kick my ass at it, and I made it. So. Well, I made it with the help of a lot of other people, like Super Soul, which is the studio that helped make the game. But yeah, like I have played that game more than any other person alive. You could kick my ass at it, which is, to be fair, the point.
No, it's a style of game that expertise isn't the point of alt.ctrl games. It's like the point is to be uncomfortable when you first play it a little bit and have fun the whole time, and then get comfortable having fun with it. And then maybe if you want to join a tournament down the line, like we do have tournaments here, go sign up for our tournaments. But that's not really the point. The point is to have fun at the tournament. Travis, we haven't gone to you yet for your sort of origin story. How did you get started in alt.ctrl?
So there's 2, I suppose.
Okay.
We're gonna go back to undergrad, and then we'll go to like actual alt.ctrl, I suppose. In undergrad, I already was kind of messing with what a game could be when I was making my games. Does anybody remember the old candy bar cell phones? Right, you held them up like this, and you could play games on them. It had a little D-pad. So the first game I ever made for a cell phone, I was like, you know what, this sucks. I hate this. I hate the controls. Let's play the game like this. And so I made an entire game where like all the directions were inverted, so you could play the game like that, just messing with the layout of the controller, and that became a theme throughout a lot of my design. My teacher at the time was like, "That's crazy. Why would you ever do that?" Because I think it's better. And then after that, I wound up in a media programming class where I built another game, and the game was a strict standard platformer. Except the fact that there was a player 2 that got stronger the more you screamed into a microphone. So, like just common, like normal things that game developers would do, right? If I suppose. But I was always looking for like ways to make my games a little bit twisty. I made another game later on where you have to sing to play, but that may or may not actually work. I'm never quite certain if it works or not. But the actual alt control stuff that inspired what you see downstairs came from a year when we were virtual and the Indie Arcade folks ran a game jam and taught us how to wire up a really simple alt control, which I think is super inspired. It's actually still sitting on my table, right? Like I could still plug it in. Super easy to do. The whole components were like $40.
It was pretty cheap. Yeah,
It
we
was like-
managed to find an easy way to do this. Also, shout out to the IMS crew for helping make that event happen.
Yeah.
Also, shout out to Mark, if you're here, for running that tutorial video on how to assemble the controller.
Literally,
Yeah.
literally frame shifters. The version I showed last year still had code from that jam running on it. The current version has been rebuilt, so it doesn't have it anymore. But it still is the same microcontroller. So that's where I got my first introduction. Was learning how to do what Amanda was learning also. Of like, hey, here's how you wire a circuit. Okay, I got the understanding. It's really not that hard. And then just kept building games from there, and then that turned into frame shifters. So I was always kind of like not just happy with making a normal game, but I wanted to make it a little bit weird. And I have students that get annoyed at me. They're like, I'm all about making a good game, but you're about like making strange games. That's the point, right? Like we figured out good games, we haven't figured out strange games yet. We never will.
Also, I don't know. Like I like to cite Robin's Line Wobbler as a really like good example of like kind of perfectly crystallized like level design. So like you can make good games in alt control games. Like I think.
Line Wobbler being the single pixel game. We have one downstairs. It's just a long row of LEDs that you play with a doorstop spring, which you mentioned earlier. But yeah, that's also interesting because that's one of those games that's like there's no computer there. It's just like all wiring and whatnot. So because we've got a whole collection of like a lot of games. Like I know the Twisty controller that we made during that game jam, Travis. That was just like, here's how you get a microcontroller to pretend to be an Xbox. And once you have that figured out, you can put any input you want on it and say, okay, twisting this knob presses the X button. Make that part of your game. So I know like some of you have shown games at a few different events now. I know like Travis, you've had frame shifters here a few different times. Amanda, you've shown Sentient Table all over the place. Am I saying that right?
Sententable.
Sententable. Thank you.
It's so hard to say.
I didn't come up with that.
What are some of the ways that those games have like changed as you've been showing them? Because I know like play testing alt control is sort of different, especially when it's something like at a festival where someone's going to knock your bike over. What has the evolutionary process been like? Also for you too, Alistair, I know a lot of your games go through tons of revisions.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I'm revising all the time. Every time I take a game out somewhere or do a performance somewhere, I am, between that session and the next one, I'm making changes. Because you watch people playing, I guess this is the same for, showcasing other, normal games as well. But I think you do get it with the alternative control. You get a very clear sense of the big thing that always bothers me is when people sit down in front of it and they go, I don't get it. If they're scared to touch it, they're scared to have a go. They're not sure what to do. It's, big red buttons can be helpful. There's a good thing of, if there's a big red button, that tends to be the thing that most people will press first, especially if they're kids. I've certainly had a game I've made which used one of these games that was involved putting buttons all around a room and getting people to run around. In the original versions of that had a whole menu system for operating it, and you choose what game mode you want and things like that. One of the changes that I made, having watched people struggle to get into it, is once it's on the game over screen, you press any button in that game and it just automatically starts. And then the first puzzle in that game is designed to be so simple that you can tell immediately what to do just by looking at it. So you're like, oh, well, I've already started, so I may as well continue. Because what happened was that players would just come up to it. They wouldn't know what it was, but they'd see a glowing button and they'd go, see what it does. And immediately, the noise would come out. They've started a game. They turn around. They see there's a projector behind them. But they're like, oh, it's a sequence of pictures of colored buttons. I know, oh, I've got to touch a blue one next. Oh, I'll go and do that now. And then you've kind of got them in, and just sort of the game then starts to pepper in more and more complex puzzles and things like that. I can't remember what the question was, so I don't know if I've answered it.
It was like, what are things that have changed in your game from you having to show it? And I mean, so it's funny that you brought it up, because like Cententable is almost identical to the version that was shown at a children's museum. The only real difference is that basically that, which is that if you press any button, the game starts. There's a 5-second countdown, but it used to be that there was a set of 2 buttons off to the side, and you had to press them, and then that would start it, and you would start single player, multiplayer. But people walk up to a row of 100 buttons, and they just go, oh, I should hit these.
Yeah.
And they do that no matter what. So like, it was just easier. I think most, like, you just end up fixing things to adjust them for like what like people automatically want to do.
I mean, I think I've also had another interesting thing that's come up doing live shows with alternative controllers, because one of the things is when you've got an alternative controller in a performance and you're hosting it, you can be there in person to give people a tutorial all the time. And in a way, that's simpler than having something where you're setting up the game in an exhibition and it needs to run itself when you're not there to explain it. When you're on stage, you can sort of bring someone on stage as your kind of example person, your tutorial person, and step them through it one by one so everyone can see. And then once you start passing that controller around the room, everybody's seen the demo already. But I guess because it involved a physical human being, it was easier for them to follow. I think that was the entirety of the point I was making.
You touched on something that I actually really enjoy about being at MAGFest. As someone who's sort of running the department, most of what I am doing is walking around, taking photos of people playing games, which means I get to just constantly watch people walk up to a bike and be like,
Good. That's the way it should be, right? Like, I'm glad they know what to do.
yeah, it's this thing where like so many of our games are such a weird thing that you've never seen before, like an orb of buttons or a paper shredder. That's actually a great example of one where everyone, it feels like what I've been seeing most is people walk up and start playing the book ritual, and then they sit down after their first shred.
Yes.
So you've really looped them in. I'd actually love for us to talk a little bit more in depth about the games that are here this session. So actually, Alistair, do you want to describe the book ritual and how that actually works so people can get a sense of what the inner workings of these games kind of look like?
Yep. So the book ritual is a kind of narrative game. You're having a conversation with a book who's kind of just... I've brought a selection of paperbacks for your use, which are all sat in front of the computer screen. You pick one of these books, and it's going to be represented on screen as a character that's talking to you, having a conversation with you, asking you to write inside of it and draw inside of it, do little creativity exercises, all asking you how you feel about certain topics and ideas. At certain points, you will need to tear pages out of the book and put them through the paper shredder, and the dialogue won't advance until you do that. So the kind of the point of the game is you're having a conversation with this book about feelings to do with grief and loss and things in your life that or relationships that you are inevitably going to lose at some point in the future, and how you sit with that feeling, and in many ways tearing up the book and putting it through the shredder, feeling it grow gradually smaller and smaller in your hand, and the fact that that is something that you have to do in order to move forwards. I wanted that to be a way to kind of physically feel some of the emotions that come up with a sort of a difficult experience around loss, while being in a safe environment, because at the end of the day, it's just a paperback book. So that's the book ritual.
I've actually been really delighted to see how many people have been playing that. We're always not sure if like a long format single player game is going to work at a festival. It's working great.
But part of the way I designed it is that because I was expecting it, and I'll try not to ramble, even though I'm very good at rambling. The first chapter is about 10 minutes. It's a little microcosm of everything it'll ask you to do, with the expectation that most people, even if they're really connecting to the game, they're probably going to have a lot of other things that they want to see at the same place. So rather than expect them to sit down with the game for an hour or 2 hours, you get a great experience. Well, hopefully, you hopefully get a very strong experience from that 10-minute session. But there is more there if you want to sit with it longer. And that was very much in the design of the writing and things to make it that 10 minutes is, good.
Whereas I know, Amanda, a lot of the games that you've brought this year are more sort of pick up and play, right?
So, I mean, technically only one of them is a game I would classify as mine.
That's fair.
Yeah. So, Sententible is very pick up and play. That one's mine. I'm sort of the curator for a group called Run Jump Dev, which brought, I believe, 8 games this year. I think. I'm bad at counting, clearly. So we brought a bunch of games this year, and those are mostly, we try to go for pick up and play experiences, mostly because the stuff we design for is frequently, again, children's museums is sort of our like background. So we're really big on, hopefully, reliability, and also on someone being able to walk up, play your game for 5 minutes and leave, because, again, children. They don't typically have the longest time span. But yeah, so the games we brought this year are Space Jeff, Kentucky Dash, Ritual. I don't remember the full name. I'm sorry, Adam. The Altar of Progress. Sorry, that one I always forget the name of. And then we brought Sententible, Velexitron, and Hardcore Cottagecore, which is the little mushroom-looking cabinet. And we also brought Match Point and Witch Ball. So, and Ossia Glow, sorry.
We have a lot of games this year.
Yeah. Last year we brought 3 claw machines, so this was a major step up in terms of how many projects we brought. But yeah, I mean, we try to make sure, like, there are things that we ask developers to do standard, which are like make it so that your game can restart on its own if somebody like walks away for 30 seconds. And generally that is the case.
Mm-hmm. Travis, did you want to talk a little bit about your game, since we're sort of talking about what we brought?
So I brought 2. The one that I can talk probably more deeply about the development is Frame Shifters. Mm-hmm. Inspired by, and you can play this game, Line Wobbler, actually. I can't even remember if I'd played I must have played Line Wobbler at this point. And other people can have their own opinions on Line Wobbler. My opinion is the point of Line Wobbler is to play with a doorstop, because doorstops are fun to play with. So the reason why I made Frame Shifters is, well, I also like spinning a bicycle wheel really fast and slowing it down, like similar feeling in my mind. For those of you who have walked along a chain link fence and like put your fingers on the chain link fence, I think there's something there too. I'm never going to do anything with it, so feel free to do that one so I can have a chain link fence game, I suppose. So that was the whole point. I was stuck in that for a while. The original design for what Frame Shifters was not going to be what it is. It wasn't going to be 2 bicycle wheels. It was 1. It was a fishing game. It uses a row of LED lights. It probably would have been fine. I never actually made it. I bought all the stuff for it and forgot about it, and it collected dust. And then I was thinking about it again, because I was at one of these showcases, and that's when it comes back into your brain. And I imagined a bike upside down. It's like, oh, well, I have more than 1 wheel to work with. What can I do with that? Well, it can be like input on a jet, right? So I can move back and forth, and that's what led into this final design. In very, very game developer-y fashion, I think I made the whole game first, sitting on the couch, like programming all the physics. I was just having fun, like programming the boat physics, programming the shader. I'm super proud of my water shader. One of my students noticed this. I think he's the only one who has noticed this. The noise on it is 3-dimensional. which be like three-dimensional noise. It's very important to me that the water looks like the foam is like changing and not just translating forward, which you never notice while playing, but I noticed. So I got all that stuff done, and then I finally like, okay, I think there's a game here that's kind of fun, and I started making the controller. It turns out that testing a bicycle controller is really hard. You have to pull a whole bike into your house and flip it upside down and like take up an entire room in your house just for a bike to sit there. While I'm working on it, this is a fun story. My dogs like to comment and be like, "What are you doing?" They just like peek in around the thing. Why are you doing that? And they like look around, they just walk away again, but they'll come in and check. The terrifying thing was you all accepted it without me ever having play tested with anyone else.
Yeah, sorry. We really liked the idea.
So like the first time I actually saw it in use was in a festival itself, and so speaking of iterations, this is a new iteration of the game that's down there. And there's a bunch of hidden stuff that you don't see. The original version of the game was a Crazy Taxi game, and the name of the game on my file system is called Hover Taxi. So like it's not even called Frame Shifters, right? It's got an in-development name. So there's a new iteration there. The whole controller has been re-architected too because I put it in front of a bunch of wonderful people, and they found ways to make it break real fast. And so I found a way to make it not break as fast, which is great because I actually, just before coming up here, I saw someone not intentionally break it, but like shove it over, and it broke again. And I was like, okay, great. Like, click, 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 line, it works again. So major takeaway, if you're doing dumb stuff like I'm doing, try to make ways to make it idiot-proof.
There's no way to do that.
There's no way to do that. That's not going to happen.
I think part of it also is as you enter into that community, you'll find people who have those insights that can help you. Like I don't think she's in the audience right now, but I want to shout out Kat from MIVS, another department here. When I was doing some of the initial design even, I was like, I'm really worried about this tipping over because I know that it's not stable. And she gave me like a whole series of things. Do this, and that will help. And they did help. And they still people found a way to shove that bike over. And so Kat, beautiful engineer, came in one night while I was sleeping and fixed the whole thing and gave me like a list. Like, here's all the things you did wrong. Here's how you fix them in the future. But it's cool to like as you like make those things and offer those things to the community, they want to see it work, right? They want to see an upside down bicycle control a video game. And so like don't be afraid of bringing those things forward. You're gonna find friends who are gonna help you learn more about that stuff. And laugh at your dumb soldering memes.
I think you mentioned like you didn't get a chance to play test. It reminded me of when we did One Night Only. The point of the game was to destroy a guitar every single time you played. And so people we got there and people were like, oh, how did you play test this? Like, we didn't play test this. It's a game where you destroy a guitar. How much money do you think I have? The event gave me $500. I bought 17 guitars. Like the very first time we broke a guitar was on stage in front of 500 people. Like you can't. Some of the stuff you just can't play test. Like it's just not gonna work.
I think, though, I mean, I feel like I've kind of learnt over the years a very important lesson is people will not interact with your game the way you expect them to. No. But often the way they interact with it is the way they naturally want to interact with it. And the way they want to, I mean, it's certainly true for my games, the way people want to interact with it is usually better and more interesting than the game that I originally set out to make. So being open to, watching people play your games and then go, see what game they think they're playing or what game they're trying to play and accept, yeah, that's probably a much better idea than the game I've made. Can I make it more like that? Can I, or, say, okay, that's that's what they naturally want to do, but I am really very sure, like, you solidify, it's understanding why they want to do it. What am I doing with this game that's making them want to play it that way? And it could be something like the kind of least important thing in the game is a big red button, and so that's the thing they want to press, and the thing that you want them to interact with is less enticing. Well, maybe you take out the big red button, But yeah, understanding that people naturally gravitate to a better version of the game than I've created, and it's my job to understand what they're doing. It's almost like improv. The first version of a game is a proposal, and the audience says yes, and they respond with a way of playing it, and it's my job to say yes and back to them. It's like, yes, you are playing it right, and to make that version of the game that you're playing better, I'm going to add this, or I'm going to change that. It's...
Yeah, I think that's sensible.
I do really like alt control being defined by the player is right, and like whatever we made as the game, whatever you're doing with it is the game, and you are correct.
I'm seeing this happen with frame shifters this year, actually. 'Cause the way the game's programmed, you can do these little micro movements on the wheel and not spin it real fast, because it's been reprogrammed to read every single spoke. And so people come up and they just do these little waggles of the bicycle wheel, like super, super small finesse, which is, oh, thank you. I'm so quiet that they have a giant sign back there reminding me that I'm quiet.
Thank you.
My students need that too. Haven knows. Shout out to Haven, who was the one who recoded the new input for frame shifters. So, Haven, can you raise one hand? Just one. There you go. Great. That's Haven. Go say hi to Haven. He's awesome, and he will talk your ear off, and you'll at some point you'll learn Tokipona from it all. I think that's how it works. But I think there's something new there. It also kind of annoys me, though, because the whole point was to spin the bike wheel fast. And so now I'm like, you're right. They're playing it correct, and it's a really good design, but it's not what I want to do, and I don't want to think about this new direction at all.
It is interesting that like something that I was talking to Nate, one of the other department heads, about this during the Sloppy Forgeries tournament last night, is you just see the meta evolve for these alt control games over the course of like 3 matches, which is really, really interesting. Stop trying to optimize our games. That's not what they're supposed to do. The optimal play is whatever you're having the most fun with. But I guess if that's winning, then yeah, well, whatever. I want to, we're getting sort of past the halfway point, and something big that I really wanted to talk about was sort of, if there are folks in the audience who are interested in alt control, what sort of advice would you all give for them for getting started, for coming up with like that first idea that they want to run with?
So I think that the great thing about alt control in general is, I've been sort of calling it like the democratization of game development. There's a lot of really easy tools out there for getting started. It just comes from like finding a thing that you like and like figuring out what the inputs need to be based on that thing. Like it could just be like using a keyboard in a novel way, but there's also like really easy libraries and tool sets and YouTube videos for using things like an Arduino. And if you can figure out how to use an Arduino, even as someone who doesn't code, like my background is English literature. That's literally my degree. I can tell you a lot about like how to like formulate like literary theory and stuff, and I have no idea how to code, and I've now like taken controllers like across like 3 continents. So I think the key is like finding what you want to do and then looking up similar things that people have done and seeing what tools they're using, because a lot of these like tool sets are really simple. Like things like either using a pre-existing tool in a way that it's not intended. Barcode scanners, for example, are super easy to utilize in like a billion different ways, or keyboards in a different like formulation or shape, or even turning them changes the way that they function. And then like if you're looking for anything more complicated, stuff like Arduino, Makey, they're all like really accessible tools now.
Yeah, the community's really been running with like quick start guides and whatnot. Any other tips?
Yeah, well, sorry, you look like you're about to lean in to the microphone. I don't want to interrupt.
I'm gonna just build off of that, because it's exactly something that Amanda said 2-3 years ago when I had you come talk to my class, you said, just program a single button. It's not that hard. And it's actually not, right? Like, don't do 100 of them, but one isn't hard. And once you figure that out, like, the logic begins to make sense. I have some other thoughts on like inspiration and getting started, but I'll let Hollister.
Yeah, so I mean, my recommendation, I would also, Arduino is a great tool to start with, and I started working with Arduino using Arduino's official kind of getting started kit, which came with, all the chips and, samples of all the components and a little manual to work through of like 20 tutorials, and that I thought was really good. And I know if you're on a tighter budget, there are kind of unofficial ones, which I think are probably just as good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But, and I think doing that, working through that is, what it will do is it'll put you in a position where if you have an idea, you can go, it gives you more ways to say, oh yes, and I would do that using blah, and it could be something that you've used in that tutorial, or you could have most of the stuff from that tutorial and you just need to look up one component. It's like, oh, I'll look up how infrared sensors work online or something because I can do it with infrared sensors. And from an ideas standpoint, I think a great way to, come up with interesting ideas for alternative controller games is to have a really bad idea and then roll with it and see. So, it's probably, could I use blank as a controller is a great way to start a bunch of ideas. So, could I use a piece of cheese as a controller? Now, there's a whole bunch of different ways you could go about that, but whatever you create out of that is going to be interesting. And I think that stupidness of the idea is part of what makes it work.
Also, to kind of piggyback, if you're in the U.S., in general, if you're interested in any of this stuff, your local library probably has a makerspace. Like, I'm out of Kentucky, and my library has a makerspace, so I'm pretty confident, especially if you're in a place that's, like, any larger, then it probably has a makerspace and, like, a very underworked technology librarian.
Who's very excited to talk.
Who would absolutely love to talk to you.
Travis, did you want to speak a bit on inspiration?
Oh yeah, so I'm weird in that I think a lot of my inspirations are less explorative of like what can games be. They're usually like, what is a feeling or a sensation I couldn't convey any other way.
Like the chain link fence.
The chain link fence, the feeling of a bicycle wheel. It's always dumb stuff like that. Always dumb stuff like that. The like similar the concept of like the sound of like leaves in the wind would be an interesting like, how do I make a game that produces that result that then maybe affects someone else? Like things that have stuck in me as like crucial memories or like poignant memories are usually the things that I mine for game designs, and then especially if they're just things that I couldn't put inside of a video game or wouldn't be nearly as interesting if it was just, oh, it's just some good Foley work and a cool 3D graphic. Not the same, right? Like it's not conveying the physicality of what I'm trying to get through to you, which is this lived experience, not this kind of fake-ish memory that we're recreating.
That's really beautiful.
Wonderful. I've done it again.
I do love, it's also like, as you started saying, you all three of you have said something along the lines of like, yeah, have a dumb idea and run with it.
Yeah.
And it is, one, really nice for you to contrast with that poetry. But it also is something that I love about every time I'm talking about all control games, like the games that we have with like other developers, is something I hear all the time is someone saying like, oh, that's so stupid, I love it. Oh, that's so dumb, I love it. How do they do that? It's just checking pixels? That's brilliant, that's dumb, I love it. We're at the 10-minute mark, and I definitely wanted to like leave a few minutes for questions from the audience, if anyone has any. I think just, raise your hand or stand up, and I'll ask you to yell. Go for it.
Hi. I produce LARP events, so live action role playing, and I produce ones that are at the intersection of LARP and immersive theater. So they're immersive, interactive, and narrative for like 20 to 100 players.
Yeah.
And it seems like philosophically
So the question is, what are ways to incorporate sort of alt control into 100-person or more LARPs, or vice versa? Yeah.
Is my controversial opinion is that it's already an alt control game. But, yeah, I think it depends on what you're trying to hit with experience wise. Like, it's kind of a big question, because it's like you could do things like, I've seen places do like the magic wand kind of thing, where everyone has a magic wand and there are touchstones throughout that you can get to, that I think would still hit that sort of alt control feel.
I have a colleague who actually does this in Indianapolis, so I can connect you with him afterwards, I suppose.
It's a strong answer.
I have no clue what else he's described. Like, one, he's like, oh, I run this LARP, but then we have this controller that's an Arduino talking to a projector that does some projection mapping stuff, and you have to like move all these things in order. It's very escape roomy, my recollection of it, to summon this demon that will then talk to you. Like, that was sort of his description of it. I'm like, that's awesome. Why are you not, like, come help me teach a class? It'll be great. He's actually, speaking of this, he's a librarian.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, I don't think I have any ideas, but I really want to try, because I think that's the most fascinating question. And I think what's interesting about it is just in terms of my kind of process personally, and what makes me particularly interested in it as a provocation is, like, the way I tend to approach things is often, you know, here's technology. Technology lives inside a computer screen. How can I bring it out into the real world? And the question of how do I take something that lives out in the real world and bring technology into it is like, it's almost like it's the opposite question. And that's fascinating to me. I don't have any obvious answers, but that's why it's fascinating to me.
All right, other questions? Actually, people who have hands up, can you just raise your hands now? And we're going to do, okay, we're going to do this side and that side. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, go for it. Less about the panel, where'd you get the hats? I got these hats from Socks. He's a great person. You should try to meet him. And that is the only answer I'm going to give. 2, yeah.
Quick for Amanda, what part of Kentucky are you from?
I'm from Lexington. Some of our devs are from Louisville.
What library?
Central Branch is a good way to get hooked up, but there's also, if you come down later, John Meister is the guy who runs the Lexitron, and he's one of the people. He used to be on the library board, so he'll know like specifically where to go.
Okay, thanks. I'll ask you later.
Okay.
Because, yeah, I live in Beaumont.
Oh yeah.
And then the actual question is, when do you think or know you've gone too far?
Ooh, the question is, when do you think or know you've gone too far?
I have no answer to that question.
You've never gone too far?
The scope has always been my problem.
So every time?
Yeah.
I've never gone far enough. One day, I hope. I hope there's a moment where I say, well, dang. I need to stop this now. But I'm not there yet. Like, the biggest worry I have with mine is, like, have I gone too far? Is someone going to get their finger stuck in a bicycle wheel? How has that not happened yet?
Don't jinx it.
Nope.
It's Saturday, don't jinx it.
That's fair, okay. I didn't say that.
Yeah, and my answer, that's also, I really like that we all say it the same, because I don't think I've gone too far. Yesterday, I was stapling Richard Nixon after Richard Nixon to a piece of cardboard in front of an audience, and you know, if you've ever seen my live streams, you know I can go much further than that.
Yeah.
Paint all over my face. So, yeah, no, there's no such thing as too far, and that's great.
I think all control is inherently kind of maximalist, so it's like really hard to get to a point where you're like, oh damn, this is a step too far. Like, no, I'm good.
It is funny that you'll see a game with one button and conclude this is maximalist game design.
There's exceptions, but yeah.
I mean, it typically is true. You are milking that one button for everything you can get out of it.
I have been, the limits that I've definitely enforced is I've not set fire to anything deliberately. Yeah. That's, I would love to play something with fire. I'd love to make something with fire. However, I have not trusted myself to do it, and when asked to do it as part of my show, I have unfortunately flatly refused.
Oh, I guess there was one thing. So it wasn't mine, but it was when I was curating an exhibition. My wife made an installation using an electromagnet and ferrous fluid, but the electromagnet kept melting through things, and ferrous fluid is toxic. So it was just like and again, we mostly work with a children's museum, and like after the second electromagnet melted, we were like, you know what? Maybe this isn't a project for us. It looked so cool.
That's why they got insurance.
All right, question number 3. Yes.
Yeah, so I'm curious if you have advice. If you have a bunch of makerspaces, we're in Richmond, Virginia, so we have a bunch of makerspaces. But I'm curious how to take that and go to more of a public venue, how to make that step maybe to like a children's museum.
Yeah, the question is, how do you take some project that you started maybe in a makerspace and take it to that next level of a children's museum or an event like this? Part of the answer is our submission form is open to anyone for the MAGFest Indie Arcade. Follow us on X or wherever we go when that site explodes. We'll post about it.
It really just, I'm a big fan of just applying anywhere. So that's one of the big ways I've done it. I also I did a show once at the Kentucky State Fair, which was really cool. Like a lot of places are weirdly down to try things. If you're looking for something like we've done with children's museums and stuff like that, usually if they have any sort of gallery space, you just apply as a gallery. The only real downside to that, which gets into some complicated weeds, is a lot of them are not wired for electronics. But that's kind of like a secondary. I have literally done a whole talk on just that subject.
I think the more places you take your work to, the more you show it off, the more people will come up to you with interesting, I'd like to have your game at such and such, that you would never have even thought of. Mm-hmm. So I think just go out there, put it into the world anywhere possible, and you'll be surprised at what leads start coming to you.
Yeah, I want to keep us moving because we're very low on time. But question 4.
I'll keep mine short. Have you considered calling it Dadaism in video games?
Have we?
Dadaism, the video game version. And the second question I had was a little more serious. Have you considered any cross-applications with accessibility or with STEM programs or even psychological experiments? I'm not saying it's like an experiment on people, but any kind of connection there.
So, I mean, I don't want to interrupt Matt because this is literally the thing he's most passionate about. But yeah, I mean, accessibility is a serious concern in the field. We're literally right after this talk, we're meeting with a bunch of alt.ctrl developers to talk about accessibility. That is the next thing I'm going to. I will say though that so a couple years ago I diagnosed with a degenerative eye disorder. I'm losing my vision, and so one of the things is that I've been moving more towards in the last couple of years is oh cool, what can I start building that will allow me to keep playing a game when I can no longer see a monitor or a screen, because that's realistically a thing that's going to happen, and that's really opening up things. It's one of the powers I think in general of alt.ctrl is the way it allows you to experiment with things that other people might not be able to experiment with, or might not be willing to do because it's not financially viable.
We are low on time. I would love to talk about this topic with literally anyone who wants to talk about it. So find me after the panel. Final question.
All right. So I was curious if any of you guys are familiar with the circuit bending scene. If there's any overlap with that community and this community.
Any of y'all do circuit bending?
I mean, I do similar stuff. It's all software-based, but it's, it is pretty similar. And that's what the Alistair's Magic Box, if you've seen down there, that's kind of very similar to circuit bending. It's how I made this hoodie, writing random data into RAM while games are running and seeing what beautiful things they create. I also would recommend Phoenix Perry is a good person to look up, because they came up through the... through the circuit bending scene. There were digital artists and video artists in the 90s, I believe, and then it might have been 90s or early 2000s, and then went into alternative controllers off the back of that. So they're a really interesting person to look up. Phoenix Perry.
Also, that's actually a great note as we are here in the last minute. If anyone has do you want to plug your social medias or anything? Products that you got going on. We got URLs on screen. Thank you all for being here, but also if you want to plug anything, now's the time.
I'm A.G. Aitchison on all my social media, A for Alistair, G for George, and Aitchison as spelt on the screen. I'm sorry, it's so complicated. I'm also on Twitch as well. I do interactive live streams, and it would be awesome to have you there. Come and join in. I'll make paintings and sing.
I'm Travis Foz. You can Google my name. You'll either find me or a man who shot a deer and is showing off his picture. Those are the two Travis Fozes.
You should make a game about that.
No, I honestly think it's an alternate version of myself because I know what my dad is like, and I know that had I grown up with him, that's who I would have been.
You can follow me there if you want, but also just follow Run Jump Dev. It's the organization I work a lot with. It's Run Jump DEV. It's on most sites. It's not so like that's probably the best way to find out more about stuff we do.
And you could sign up for the Indie Arcade mailing list downstairs to learn more about what we're doing. Thank you so much for coming to our panel. Thank you so much for our panelists.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having us.